AskReddit by Liversaw and me. Campersofreddit, what's the most disturbing thing you have saw while camping? Went to an empty campground in the mountains in California. The weather was bad, January of 16 or 17. We were set up near a small river cooking a late dinner in the dark after night fell. My old dog, a husky, starts absolutely losing his mind. He was screaming and barking at a place beyond our lantern light away towards the river. I flipped on my headlamp, and it was a mountain lion. It stared back at me for a second or two, then turned and I lost it in the brush. Those eyes staring back at me, bring your dog camping with you. Just an aside, but keep control of your dog when camping. A ridiculous amount of bear attacks are from people hiking camping with off-leash dogs. The bear come after the dog, and the dog runs back to their person. While hiking in Sweden I slept in a 3-sided shelter when suddenly at 11 PM some people came up to me asking me what I was doing etc. Neighborhood watch, and telling me that there are strange people around. An hour or two after, I heard some more footsteps and an old man came close to the shelter with no pants. Naked. Dong dingeling. Moon was bright. When he saw me sleeping there, he went away after a while. That's just Jens. He likes the brisk air. As I was unpacking for a solo camping quail hunt, two guys walked into my camp to chat. Dirty and very disheveled, obviously drunk. They asked me if you got bullets for that gun when they saw my shotgun case. After a few minutes they turned to walk back to their camp. I saw that one of them had his scalp peeled back, leaving an open and crusty wound the size of the palm of my hand. That night they drank and threw .22 rounds into the fire and ran. Eventually they passed out. The next day they were arrested and I was told that the one with the scalp wound tried to attack someone with a roofing axe a couple of days earlier and got the reverse card played and they were up there hiding out. Man, this really feels like a story from the 1920s that ends in absolute horror somehow. A couple came to the spot next to ours after we had been camping for a few days. They were there for about 2 hours after unpacking and setting up camp, just practicing knife throwing and cracking a whip. One of them cut their finger off and the other came and asked if we could watch their campsite until they got back. We did. We also played Indiana Jones for about 3 hours drunk off our ass trying to swing from a broken branch of a tree with that whip. They never came back and we let the park ranger know to look after their stuff. Let me just hike out of here and have my finger reattached. I should be back in a jiff. Forever ago my friend and I were camping in a horse pasture, with the owner's permission, with my friend's horse. It damn near crushed me when it decided that he wanted to be in the tent too and see what we were doing. Reminds me of a couple years ago me and some budders hiked out behind his mom's house and ate some mushrooms. After tripping all day and drinking a few beers, we were stumbling back to his house, and this horse came up to us pretty aggressively. None of us know enough about horses to read their body language, and we were too tired to run away. So we just sort of edged around it and made it out the other side of the field. When we got back to his house, his mom goes, "Oh, that's just old Floyd. He was just seeing if you had any beer or pot. That horse loves drinking beer and smoking pot." Went camping on the Mendocino coast of California in 80s-90s. The first night at the campground we hear what sounds like a woman screaming like she's being murdered. It terrified us all awake. After a sleepless night we learned that there was a peacock sanctuary nearby and that's how they sound. Oh yeah, peacocks sound absolutely brutal. We used to have a neighborhood peacock, tiny village in Germany. Nobody knew where it came from, probably from some nearby farm. But one day it just decided it lived in our street, where I lived as a kid with my parents. The neighbors called him Egon because his cries were so ugly he got an ugly name lol. But it was so cool having him around. In the spring, he would often spread out his colorful tail feathers and that was really beautiful. My parents had a whole vase with his colorful tail feathers, all fallen out naturally. He was fed by neighbors, but nobody ever attained him in any way and he stayed for years, blessing us with beautiful sights and ugly sounds lol. I got pretty good at imitating that cry as a kid. He once spooked my parents by repeatedly sliding down the roof onto the flat rooftop terrace next to it with a loud bar. My family had some land in a remote part of Colorado. We always had creepy nights up there where it felt like someone was watching us. My brother was up there once and heard footsteps around his tent and got so scared him and his fiancée left in the middle of the night. A few weeks later, 4 of us were up there and we found 4 rat tails nailed to the side of an old shed we had. We sold the land a few years ago. At first I was wondering if you met the same woman I did, but she wouldn't have nailed rat tails to trees. She's just an old hippie lady who spends the summers camping. Her hobby is to do shrooms and silently sneak through people's campsites in the middle of the night. She claims to have never been caught. I was like 8-9 years old when I saw my grandpa standing bare naked by the river in the middle of the night when I had to go to pee, something that scared the crap out of me as I didn't see that it was him at first. He was apparently just taking a quick bath, something he usually does at night time when he's out camping, but the sight of him standing there still haunts me a little to this day. Seeing grandparents naked can be startling at the best of times, let alone your scenario. My sons and I went camping in a very remote spot deep in the Idaho woods. We went for a 2-mile hike even deeper into the woods and came across a perfect circle about 5 feet in diameter made completely of bones with a smaller circle of bones in the center of the circle with a deer skull placed directly in the middle. On the way back we looped around and found ourselves in front of a dense group of birch trees that gave off the darkest vibe. My sons and I all had goosebumps. We bypassed the birches and eventually made it back to camp. I think that 90% of the creepy, paranormal, supernatural stories you hear about the woods have rational explanations including my story, but even though the ring of bones was odd, it's the dark ominous feeling that we all got from the birches that really unsettled me. Never ignore that feeling. I've never been in direct danger, but a few times it's come up, where hairs on your neck stand up. I've seen a bear, mountain lion, and a pack of coyotes nearby shortly after. I always listen to it and go on high alert. It's weird how your brain can pick up on it, but you don't directly realize it. A buddy of mine and I were paddling the Buffalo River in Arkansas. For reasons neither interesting nor relevant, we had to pull off and camp for the night next to a field in the middle of nowhere. In the middle of the night, we were awakened by ATVs not too far away. They got closer and closer until they were at our campsite. They started doing laps around our tent and yelling all kinds of things. It was exactly how you would imagine it would go in a movie right before the psycho rednecks do terrible things to the protagonists. Also, I'm from a redneck place where this was a completely plausible scenario ending with me and my buddy bleeding at least a little. So we just laid there and hoped for the best and fortunately they quickly got bored and left. Seems the scariest part of a lot of these stories are other people. This is a story about my grandma that I didn't hear directly from her, but from my family. My grandmother, born in the 20s, grew up in suburban Florida and didn't really have any experience with wildlife. After she married my grandfather, they went camping in Yellowstone, possibly their honeymoon, not sure. They went for a hike and when they came back they saw a bear at the campground sniffing around the steaks my grandma was gonna prepare for dinner. My grandma ran up to the bear and smacked on the nose with the flat side of an axe, not recommended. Fortunately the bear ran off. Now, I have no idea how big this bear was, may have been a baby for all I know, but still makes for a good story. She was also a real life Rosie the Riveter during WW2. My grandma was a badass. My great grandma chased a bear off of her screened-in porch with a broom when she was in her 80s. Here's to all of the badass grandmas. For some reason some people don't actually sit on the toilet seat in the campground vault toilets. Nothing is scarier than waking up at 3 AM half drunk half hungover when you are camping and walking to the bathroom to find someone have shit all over the toilet seat and didn't even attempt to clean it up. Fuck those campers. Having to break out a shovel to shit sucks. Why all the hover shits? Not long ago, me and my friend went camping together. It was a public trail, so other campers were expected. Though, I didn't expect to wake up at 4 AM to a balding middle-aged man squatting behind a tree about 3 or 4 meters from our tent with a trowel in hand. We locked eyes and he just said I'd give it 5 minutes. At least he was nice to make it quick so you could have a turn. One time there were these campers across from us at another site and they were late 20s. They were drinking late into the night, which usually isn't a problem. Corp of Engineers Park. But this one fucker would make this loud scream every time he took a shot and he wouldn't stop doing it. At around 2 AM finally someone pulled up on a gator and told them all to shut up. This guy wasn't getting the hint and his friends were telling him loudly not to drink anymore or scream. It got quiet for about 10 minutes and then from inside my tent I saw headlights and heard a car pulling out. I figured someone was taking him home cause he was being annoying and ruining the fun for everyone. I'm finally starting to doze off and with my eyes closed I see a big blue flash and then a loud noise. There was a substation down the street and I'm pretty sure that guy drove himself into it or something close to it cause it was crazy bright and loud. I would say I feel sorry for the guy, but he was the most annoying person I had never met in my life. I probably heard him do his stupid ass Mario scream 15 times that night after 1 AM. Did he live? Damn. A friend of mine wild camped and found a nice spot. When the sun came up she found out that she was in someone's backyard and the family was sitting there eating breakfast and watching as she quietly packed up and left. This is my favorite so far, but these are all great. We were camping in St. Regis, Montana and floating down the Clark Fork River. I was maybe 15 years old. We split the family into rafts. Dad always misjudged the timing and a 5-hour float trip always turned into a 8-hour trip. We hit the water at 2 PM so by the last stretch, it was getting dark and cold. We all heard a woman asking for help, not screaming but yelling, "Help me, please help me." I see a woman on the side of the river trying to reach the water with a guy behind her pushing her into the ground. Her shirt was ripped, she was chubby with olive skin, black hair. I remember she looked like my mom's age, about 40. Her hair was all jacked up on one side and there were twigs poking out. Us kids froze, but my dad started frantic paddling towards us kids and threw a rope so we didn't float down the river without them, and then he got both rafts to the side of the river. By then we were so far That's fucked. I went on a family camping trip in Austria as a kid. The campsite was in a forest, and my dad picked a nice spot between some trees. Unfortunately our tent wouldn't fit so we had to move along a bit. That night there was a massive storm and I remember my parents tying the tent to the car and spending most of the night holding the tent down. In the morning we woke up and it was a bright sunny day. We opened the tent to find a 2-foot thick tree laying across the spot we originally picked. If our tent had fitted in that spot we would have probably been killed. My mum cut the trip short at that point. Things to keep an eye out for when pitching camp: dead trees and deep sand. Was with a group of about 8 people. We were in a very isolated location, not a formal campground. We always preferred to hike in and get as far away from other people as possible. Around 9 or 10 it was pitch black and the woods were silent, no wind. We were all pretty buzzed off whiskey at this point, and out of fucking nowhere this dude with a hunting rifle on his back steps into the firelight. He wasn't wearing a shirt and basically looked homeless, kind of a blank stare on his face. Keep in mind, we were in the Rockies at like 10k feet, so it was not warm, and he wasn't wearing a shirt. The fact that we didn't hear him meant he had definitely snuck up on us. We went silent and just stared at him. He looked around, didn't say a word, and backed into the darkness. We slept in shifts that night and kept the fire blazing. We could hear him moving around our camp till sunrise when I deleted. Damn, this is the most messed up one. WTF. My friends and I went camping a few years ago. Just a campsite in Wales, but I remember waking up at 3 AM needing the toilet and stumbled past an extremely obese couple having very loud and aggressive sex in the shower's toilet area. Was half pissed but they didn't even stop when I walked in. They did have the decency to almost slow down to a snail pace as I awkwardly peed and made sure to head out as quickly as possible and not make eye contact. The wonders of nature. NSFW, Lamar Valley, Yellowstone NP, 2006. A man and woman pulled into the turnoff I was parked at and proceeded to walk about 50 feet down the hill and set up a nice little picnic spread. After setting up their blanket, I expected for them to unload their food. Nope. In the basket was about 25 various sized stuffed animals. Beanie Babies, large stuffed plushies, etc. They then proceeded to have a play date with them. I couldn't hear exactly what was being said, but it obviously sexual in nature. I watched them for several minutes before leaving and spent the remainder of the day fishing around the park. Around dusk, I returned to my campsite to find them 2 sites down from me. Of course, all the plushies were set up at the picnic table in front of the fire. NSFW part, once fully dark, they retreated to their tent and proceeded to engage in sexual acts with the plushies. I will not Anyway, I left and drove to another campground halfway across the park. I'm just picturing it like one of the scenes from Austin Powers and you see a stuffed animal fall out of her silhouette lol. Deleted. At least he didn't shake the baby to death. That's where this relationship was headed. Not my story, but my childhood friend wandered off with a buddy on a scout trip and found a corpse in the woods. Had a .22 caliber hole between its eyes. The two of them were 13ish. He went to the trial, and had been advised that he might have to testify, since he discovered a murder victim. But, they ended up not calling either of the kids. Did the person get convicted? Gotta rewind like 25 years, the Blair Witch Project had recently come out, this is pre-internet for all intents and purposes, and the rumors were that it was real found footage, silly to say today I know. We woke up in the morning to find stones piled in front of our tent like in the movie. I'm sure it was just some kids from a neighboring camp, but it still freaked us out. Part of the reason Blair Witch did so well was the missing posters that the filmmakers plastered all over Cannes. It was the original guerrilla marketing campaign, not silly at all. Went to the forest with some friends one winter. We were completely unprepared and ended up sleeping bunched in a tiny tent in the snow. I woke up in the middle of the night hearing these grunting noises next to my head. I thought it was my friend snoring, but then realized there was this giant snout poking the fabric of the tent on the outside and literally breathing in my face. I barely held myself from screaming when the bear got bored of trying to get inside and left. We went outside in the morning and there were massive paw prints everywhere, plus the leftovers of our food were gone. Lesson learned the hard way. Just for your information, that wasn't the hard way.